Hi everyone, welcome to Excel with UT. In today's session, we are going to talk about few common errors that we see while processing the data or working on the data and how we can handle those errors. So there are few functions or formulas in Excel that help us to handle those errors. And also these formulas are logical formulas. That's the reason we are covering it along with the logical functions. We covered the initial if and ifs function. So similar to that, these error handlers are logical error handlers, and we will see how we are using these error handlers to fix these errors. So let's jump into the data. So uh, I have a common data set here. So we are talking about the sales and the number of units, and we are calculating the margin for some number of employees here. Now you can see here in the margin, we are getting few errors here. So this is div by 0. So this is basically an error when you are dividing any particular quantity or a number by 0. As you know, division by 0 is not a valid division. That's why it's giving this error. So how we can fix this error? And if you see, we also want to calculate the average at the end of the margin column. But since we have a few error in between of the column, that's the reason the average is also shown as error. So how we can fix this? So we have a formula called IFERROR, and that will be used to fix this error here. So what we can do? So we can use the formula IFERROR. So IFERROR, basically, how does it function? It requires two arguments. The first is the argument, basically we are whatever function or whatever calculations that we are doing. So that is the value that we need to provide. So in this case, what we were doing, we were dividing the sales by the unit, which gives us the margin. So this is the operations that we were doing. And in case we say this value gives us an error, what value you want in place of that error? Because if you don't put this formula, there will be an error like division by 0. But in case if there is an error, what value you want it to be? So what I can do, I can put a 0 here, and I'll close the formula here, and I'll say enter. Now if you see, if I drag it down, so it has given me the values in all the columns, in all the rows here. And now if I do an average here, you can see I'm not getting an error here. Instead, I'm getting an average here. So this is how we can handle the error here. And we have seen here, if there is an error, how it affects our working. If we are applying any formula on the error column, the formula will not be working here. So this is how we can fix here. Now similarly, we don't need to go to an extra column. You can directly work in the same column. And if you see, we have already applied the formula here. Just in front of the formula, if you use IFERROR, and whatever the operations that we have done, that becomes our value. And value if error, what's the value that you want to give? Let's give it a 0, and we'll populate these to all the rows, and you can see the average gets calculated here itself. So that's how you'll handle the if error here. Now in case you don't want the value, in case of error you don't want a 0, you want to flag something else, so that can also be done here. So let me just Uh, Again, type the sales and the unit. Let me just again get the margin here. So in this case, we are not calculating an average here. However, we want a marker which says or which tells us that a particular margin or something we need to call out. Okay, so what we can do, again, we are using the if error here. So the value becomes the operation that we are doing. So we are dividing the sales by the unit, that becomes the value. Now, the value that you want to give in place of error, we don't want to give a number because in this situation, we are not calculating the average or any other operations. However, we need to create a flag here, or we need to create a marker here. So what we can do, we can use the double quotes and we can mention the flag as margin not available. And since it's a text, we'll wrap it in the double quotes and we'll say enter here. Now, if I put it down, you can see that's how we have the complete row populated. So wherever we have the numbers, it's towards the rightmost side. And wherever we don't have the numbers, and it's basically we have created a flag saying margin not available, it will start from the leftmost of the cell, denoting it is a text here. So that's how if error works. You can use, if there is an operation that you are intending to do, you can use a number in the error places. And in case you want to create a marker which shows or which tells you uh, whether you have the value or you don't have the value, or you want to call out the error specifically in a different way, you can create a flag like this as well. So this is again works in a logical way, hence it's is part of, or it's in the parent history or in the parent formula of if this function has been called out. Now we have other common errors as well. Multiple errors. You have a division by zero, which we just saw. We have a not available error. We have a null error, which is an intersection error. We have an invalid number error. We have a reference error. We have a wrong data type error. So there are multiple types of error that we have. So all these error can be fixed by the formula called if error. So any type of error is there, yes, you can use the if error in the same way and it will be fixed. So these are the other common types of error that we have. Now let's go to another formula, IFNA. So IFNA is a specific type of error formula specifically designed for errors, NA errors. So after 2013 Excel versions, after that version, this specific error specifically for NA errors was created. So when do we get the NA error? So NA error basically when we are referencing a particular item from a array and that item is not available in that array, you get that NA error. So basically whenever you are referencing and there is a failure in the referencing, we get that NA error. So let me just demonstrate what I'm trying to say here. So I have a small data set, city-wise population. I have the numbers here and I want to populate the population of a city Delhi in another place. So what I'll do, I'll use a formula called VLOOKUP. I'll look up Delhi and it's talking about the array. I'll give the array. I'll take column number 2 as a population, exact match. And we see we have the population 34, which has been fetched from above array. Okay. Now, this is how you have the population here. Now, in case you want to fetch for a city which is not there, Let's say Mumbai, for example. See, the moment you type Mumbai here, the error becomes NA. So in these kind of error, you can simply use the formula if NA. So how we can do it? You can simply start the if. You can wrap around your VLOOKUP with the if NA function. Say tab to enter into the formula. Now value becomes the operation that you were doing. So you were doing the VLOOKUP, you were referencing the population of the city from the above array. So this VLOOKUP becomes the operation. So we'll take the complete formula, and in the end of the formula, we'll put a comma, and now it's asking the value if NA. So what's the value if NA? So again, we can give a number here in case we are doing any operations. And if you're not doing any operation, we want to create a flag here. We can say the flag, we can name the flag. In this case, let me say not available. And let me just close this. Now you can see I have the flag as not available here because this Mumbai city was not available in this array. Now the moment I type any other city which is there in the array, it will fetch me the population correctly. But in case if I'm trying to find any city which is not there in the array, it will throw me an error. And now since I have wrapped the error with the if NA, I have the not available message which I have put it into the VLOOKUP function. So this is the major usage of if NA. So if NA, just for an observation, so if NA is specific to NA error. So if you see, if you try to use if NA, if you try to use if NA in the prior condition, so the value that we want here is sales divided by the unit, and the value if NA is, let's say, not there. So if I populate it down, now you can see even if we used if NA, we're still getting this error. So that shows if NA does not work in along with if NA does not work with any of the other errors. It only and only works with the error that is NA, and it does not works with any of the other array. However, the reverse is true. If you want to use if error here, for example, let me show you in this example. Let me copy it here. And instead of K14, let me just give this as the lookup value. Now, if I'm using Delhi, both the places I'm getting the correct value. But if I'm using Mumbai, I'm not getting the correct value. So in this case, let me use if error here. So we have the now, so currently we are using if NA. So instead of this if NA, let me just remove this if NA. I've just done a VLOOKUP here. So In this VLOOKUP, instead of IFNA, I'm doing IFERROR. So it is asking me the value again. So the VLOOKUP becomes the value here, and after the value, the what we want to give as the message here. Let me just give the message as if error works, and I'll close this and see if the moment I enter here, it gives me the mirror message. So you can see that if error works with all types of error. So even if it's NA error, if error will work successfully here. However, the reverse is not true, as we saw in this column here. If NA specifically works for any type of error, and it will not work with any other type of error. So we have a list of error. You can see here, all these are different type of error. So if error will work in all these errors. However, if NA only works in the error which has NA. So that's the basic difference here. Now we have another function, not, which goes along with these error handling functions. So basically, the usage of not is to change the direction of the Boolean expressions. So if we are doing any logical test and we are trying to see the result, and we are only trying to gauge the results as true or false. So what the function not does, it reverses the direction of the result basically. So if you're doing a particular logical function test, and if the result is true, the not function will change it to false. And if the result is false, the not function will change it to true. So that's how it works here. So I've done a small comparison here. So I've used this population, and I've just, if you see the formula, I've just compared the population to a mark of 26, and that's the result that we have. So all these populations are more than 26, and the below two populations of Dhaka and Cairo are less than 26. Now if you want to use the not function here, we'll simply say not changes false to true and true to false, as you can see in the prompt here. Now if I use the same logical function again here, where we are saying the population this is greater than 26, and we say enter, and we drag it down, you can see it has reversed the direction of the logical functions here. So all these cases were true. However, since we've used the not function, it has changed the direction from true to false. So one might wonder what is the use of this function, where this might be used. So these are used basically in a scenario where we are using extensive logical functions, and after a certain point, we want a scenario which is just a reverse of the logical scenarios that we have used. For example, we have used extensive logical scenarios, and we also want to see a case where we want to see a reverse of the logical scenario again. So we don't have to write the logical scenario all over again with the reverse condition. So we can simply use the not function, and we can just use the earlier logical scenario, and we can get the reverse results as well. So that's the use of the not function, basically to get the reverse results. So this basically does it by reversing the Boolean expressions. So this is a small example. This is a small formula which sometimes gets used to get or try to see all type of scenarios when you're working with the logical functions. So these were the three functions that help us to handle the different kind of errors, and we can use it often while working with the logical functions. I hope the video was helpful. Let us know in the comments if you have any questions. Thanks a lot for attending.